Everything about the poorest and fairest president of Uruguay, Jose Alberto, his life and everything about him. Part 2. We continue to tell a stage of the life of the Rashidun Caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab. Mujica has drawn worldwide attention for his simple lifestyle. He has used a 1987 Volkswagen Beetle and his 60-year-old bicycle as means of transportation. In 2010, the value of the car was $1,800 and represented the entirety of the mandatory annual personal wealth declaration filed by Mujica for that year. In November 2014, the Uruguayan newspaper Bicicleta reported that he had been offered $1 million for the car. He said that if he did get $1 million for the car, it would be donated to house the homeless through a program that he supports. Mujica is an atheist. In 2017, Mujica discussed his beliefs. My doubts with God are philosophical. Or maybe I believe in God. Maybe I don't know, or maybe, as I'm getting closer to death, I need it. He has spoken positively of the Catholic Church, which he acknowledged is deeply entwined in Latin American identity. Mujica is an avid football fan and supports his local team Cerro. When the Uruguay national football team returned from their World Cup campaign in 2014 at Carrasco International Airport, and following FIFA suspending Luis Suarez from all football activities for 4 months after biting Italian defender Giorgio Chiellini, Mujica criticized the organization, calling them sons of bitches who meted out fascist treatments. Realizing he was being filmed, Mujica covered his mouth. Journalists then asked if they could publish his remark, to which he replied in laughter, yes. On April 2024, Mujica announced that he was diagnosed with esophageal cancer, which was found during a physical examination, adding that the risks to his condition were aggravated by a pre-existing autoimmune disease. During the last months of 2013, Serbian film director Emir Kusturica started shooting a documentary on the life of Mujica, whom he considers the last hero of politics. The film, titled El Pepe, Una Vida Suprema, was released in 2018. In 2014, Italian author Frank Iadice wrote the book Breve Dialogo sulla Felicità, which centers on the life of Mujica. 10,000 copies of the book were printed and distributed for free to local school children. In June 2016, Mujica received the Order of the Flag of Republika Srpska from the President of Republika Srpska, Milorad Dodik. Uruguayan film director Alvaro Brechner's 2018 film A 12-Year Night La Noche de 12 Años was based on Mujica's 12-year-long prison life under military dictatorship. It premiered in official selection at the 75th Venice International Film Festival, and it was selected as the Uruguayan entry for the Best Foreign Language Film at the 91st Academy Awards. The film won the Golden Pyramid Award at the 40th Cairo International Film Festival. During a talk at the 28th Guadalajara International Book Fair, Mexico, on Sunday the 7th of December 2014, Mujica was interviewed by Mexican journalist Ricardo Rocha. Uruguay's president addressed several topics, such as drug trafficking, drug legalization, poverty and social injustice. We live on the most unjust continent in the world, probably the richest, but with the worst distribution of wealth. On Latin America, Jose Mujica stated that he was passionate about bringing Latin Americans together, about what defines us as belonging to a great nation that is to be created. There are multinational states, like China, like India, like what Europe is doing after a history of wars. Mujica also addressed the question of the shared linguistic heritage of Latin Americans, remarking with respect to the region's 2 major languages that Portuguese is a sweet Spanish, if you speak it slowly. And even more so if it has a feminine sweetness. And he pointed out another element that unites the countries in Latin America. We have another identity, the Christian and Catholic tradition. He concluded his talk by adding, I see that there are many young people here. As an old man, a little advice. Life can set us a lot of snares, a lot of bumps. We can fail 1,000 times, in life, in love, in the social struggle. But, if we search for it, we'll have the strength to get up again and start over. The most beautiful thing about the day is that it dawns. There is always a dawn after the night has passed. Don't forget it, kids. The only losers are the ones who stop fighting. In 2021, Carolina Darabertis published a novel based on Mujica's life, entitled The President and the Frog, published in 2022 as El Presidente y la Rana. Uruguay's former guerrilla-turned-president, Jose Mujica, widely known as a leftist icon who transformed his small country into one of the most socially liberal in all of Latin America, said Monday that he has esophageal cancer. Mujica, 88, said he was diagnosed during a routine medical checkup last Friday. He said the tumor discovered in his esophagus is particularly dangerous because he also suffers from an autoimmune disease. This is obviously very complicated and doubly so in my case, the ex-president who governed Uruguay from 2010 to 2015 told reporters Monday. He said doctors were assessing the best course of action but warned him that chemotherapy and surgery posed challenges. Known among both fans and detractors as Pepe Mujica, the folksy leader of Uruguay, a country of just 3.3 million people, was first a leader of the Tupamaros, the Marxist guerrilla group that drew inspiration from the Cuban Revolution. In the 1960s and early 1970s, Mujica wielded weapons on Montevideo streets in an effort to overthrow the government, getting shot by police several times and ultimately landing in prison until the fall of the country's dictatorship led to his release in 1985. As Uruguay's 40th president, Mujica legalized same-sex marriage, a bold move in the predominantly Roman Catholic country, and boosted women's rights. He also made Uruguay the first nation in the world to fully legalize recreational marijuana. He drew admiration in Uruguay and far afield as a politician who spoke with blunt honesty and lived up to his own values, shunning the presidential palace in favor of his modest house on the outskirts of Montevideo and donating most of his salary to charity. "I live as I think," he told the Associated Press in an interview last fall. "When we have companions, we're not poor." Although Mujica left the Senate in 2020, he remained a powerful force in the Broad Front, a coalition of leftist parties and centrist social democrats. In his characteristically charming and self-effacing style, Mujica turned the press conference on his diagnosis into a pep talk for the country's youth. "I want to convey to all the young people that life is beautiful, but it wears you out and you fall," he said. "The point is to start over every time you fall. If there is anger, transform it into hope." Mujica was born to parents of modest means and grew up in a neighborhood on the outskirts of Montevideo. In the early 1960s, Mujica joined the Tupamaro, a revolutionary organization founded by Raúl Sendic and others whose goal was to undermine Uruguay's repressive leadership. Within a few years, the Tupamaro turned to violent actions, including arson, political kidnappings, and assassinations of a number of police officers and some others. Mujica was arrested several times for his activities and was convicted in 1971 of having killed a police officer. He escaped from prison twice but was recaptured both times and served some 14 years in all. As a prisoner of the brutal military dictatorship that seized power in a coup in June 1973, Mujica was tortured and spent long periods of time in solitary confinement, including 2 years at the bottom of a well. After the failure of a 1980 plebiscite on a new constitution that stopped short of the restoration of full democracy, and amid an ever-growing economic crisis, the dictatorship negotiated a return to democratic government in 1985. Mujica and the other political prisoners were freed later that year under a general amnesty. The Tupamaro joined the leftist coalition known as the Broad Front Frente Amplio, FA, and reorganized as a legal political party, the Movement of Popular Participation Movimiento de Participación Popular, MPP, for the 1989 elections. Mujica became one of the MPP's leading voices. Meanwhile, he moved to a farm outside Montevideo with his longtime partner and fellow former Tupamaro member, Lucia Topolansky, who also remained active in politics. They married in 2005. Mujica served one term in the Chamber of Representatives 1995 to 2000 and was then elected to the Senate in 2000. In 2004, he was re-elected to the Senate as a member of the Progressive Encounter Broad Front Encuentro Progresista Frente Amplio, EPFA coalition, which captured majorities in both legislative houses and whose presidential candidate, socialist Tabaré Vázquez, also won election. In the process, Mujica was sworn in as Senate leader in February 2005. He also served as Minister of Agriculture, 2005 to 2008, in Vázquez's cabinet. Riding a wave of approval for Vázquez's successful center-left government, Mujica sought and won nomination as the EP-FA's presidential candidate in the 2009 elections. One of his chief competitors, Danilo Astori, a fellow senator and former finance minister, eventually joined the ticket as the vice presidential candidate. During the campaign, Mujica was the front-runner, but his guerrilla past, which he was at pains to show was well behind him, stirred controversy, as did his public criticism of the leaders of some other South American countries, including Argentina and Venezuela. Although the EPFA maintained its parliamentary majority in voting on October 25, Mujica did not secure the 50% plus one share of the vote necessary to prevent a runoff election for the presidency. In the runoff, held on November 29, Mujica defeated former President Luis Lacalle Herrera of the National Blanco Party and took office March 1, 2010. Under Mujica's leadership, the Uruguayan economy continued to prosper, posting consistent growth in GDP and per capita GDP while maintaining low unemployment rates. Against this backdrop, his administration introduced progressive legislation that altered Uruguay's social landscape. In June 2012, Mujica proposed that the government legalize and distribute marijuana to cut off revenue to drug dealers. Then, in November, a bill was introduced in the House of Representatives outlining a framework for government regulation of marijuana production, sales, and consumption. By the end of December 2013, the House and Senate had passed the bill, and Mujica had signed it into law. In October 2012, Uruguay had become the first South American country to allow abortions up to the 12th week of pregnancy, and in May 2013, Mujica signed a bill that made Uruguay the second country in Latin America to legalize same-sex marriage. Mujica was constitutionally prohibited from seeking a second, consecutive term, but, in much the same fashion that he had ridden into the presidency on the goodwill generated by the Vázquez regime, he was able to return the favor, as the popularity of Mujica's rule paved the way for Vázquez's triumph over the National Party's Luis Lacalle Pou, the son of Mujica's opponent in 2009 in the November 2014 presidential runoff election. Mujica left office the following year. Tupamaro, Uruguayan leftist urban guerrilla organization founded in about 1963. The group was named for Tupac Amaru II, the leader of an 18th-century revolt against Spanish rule in Peru. The chief founder of Tupamaro was Raúl Sendic, a labor organizer. The earliest Tupamaro efforts were a mixture of idealism, public relations, and theft, robbing banks and businesses and distributing food and goods to the poor. In 1968, Tupamaro began more aggressive efforts to undermine the established order, including raids on arsenals, arson, political kidnappings, with those taken held in a secret people's prison, and assassinations of a number of police officers and some others. The organization also carried out bombings against foreign interests, particularly those of Brazil and the United States. In 1971, it kidnapped the British ambassador and held him for 8 months. Its success was brief, however. By the time of the June 1973 military coup in Uruguay, Tupamaro had been neutralized by government troops, which managed to kill some 300 members and imprison nearly 3,000 others. After democratic rule returned to Uruguay in 1985, most of those jailed, including Sendic, were released under a general amnesty, and Tupamaro was reorganized as a legal political party. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. Soon we will publish Part 3. Thank you for watching.